This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/MapperForward to find out how you can become a member today. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and we are here for episode 3 of 5 with Todd McCarthy. Hey again, Todd.
Howdy, y'all.
We are talking about the changes in the coffee industry over the past decade or 2 decades. And in this episode, we're going to look at how very interesting times that we are facing now are causing some rapid changes in the industry. Todd, as the owner of a cafe, specifically today, we're going to focus on, the uncertain times ahead and what challenges cafe owners are facing into the future. And then in the next episode, we're going to talk about that specifically for coffee roasting companies, because you also own a coffee roasting company. So in your mind, what are the challenges that are ahead for cafe owners?
I mean, if you are still here now, ultimate praise to you. It has been such an incredibly tough couple of years. And if you're still on your feet, you've thought long, you've thought hard, you've endured an immense amount. And I really take my hat off to you. It's because I know how hard it is. There's blood, sweat, and tears involved. But I mean, the challenges that are coming up, are they equal to what we've just experienced? You know, everything is going to really start to pinch a little bit tighter. And it's going to be seen, across the board, not just in the hospitality sector and the cafe and coffee industries, but across the board. You will start, as a cafe owner, you will start to see some fairly significant changes in how people, in attendance, in spend. But I mean, that's just the start of it. But I think the biggest challenge as a cafe owner is it's all surrounding profitability at the moment. I mean, how much are we able to charge for something? We've just had a 5% wage increase. We've just had a 0.5% increase in superannuation. And all of these things, they're just sort of, again, compounding into, well, how much am I able to charge for that flat white? How much am I able to charge for that croissant before someone says, whoa, that's getting too much. So, I mean, is it a case of just getting to that point, dialing it back 50 cents, and then that's your happy medium? I mean, we just don't know, because, we're starting to see the people who used to come in and sit down, have a couple of cups of coffee, chat with their friends, spend half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, maybe stay for lunch, maybe even stay for a cocktail after that. I mean, all of that's starting to trim right up. And, but I mean, that's, as I said, it's just the beginning of something. It's not just the cafe coffee industry. Another, I guess, challenge is around staff attraction. And even more so, retention is being able to keep them on board. But it sort of comes back to what we were speaking about earlier, is the cafe and coffee industry is such a migratory workforce where people are sort of coming into it, coming out of it, whilst they're doing other things. Just really trying to gather a workforce that's well balanced, that has enough experience to handle to clients in a friendly and meaningful way. I mean, even that's starting to, coming from someone in regional New South Wales, those people are becoming fewer and further in between one another. They're and when they come out of the woodwork, you're like, oh my God, they're here. and you gather them and you need to sort of empower them into the role that they sit in. Other challenges, I mean, utilities, power, gas.
Jesus.
Holy moly.
Yeah. And this is just the beginning of this energy crisis, right?
Absolutely it is. And it's trickling down from geopolitical issues that are happening in the world, And it's all sort of, it's really starting to cause a little bit of havoc. But other things, that sort of works into the demands around the coffee supply chain as well. That's going to be a trickle down effect from roasting companies into cafe owners. And I'm sure that the majority of you out there have already received a letter, an email, had that telephone conversation. Yeah, it would have been hard, but that as it's just preparing you for what's going to be coming up.
It's sorry, something that you said that was really interesting about the pricing with regards to coffee, the cost of green coffee, the cost of roasted coffee, it's all going up. And we then have to look at how do we pass that on to the end consumer, not knowing what their comfort level is. And, there has been a 5% increase to minimum wage here, and there's been an increase to superannuation or 401k in the United States. But over here, in Australia, there's been an increase to those things. But because inflation has gone up so much across every sector, like it is astonishing how expensive vegetables are in Australia right now. And we're in the middle right now of some savage flooding that's going on for the 4th time this year. And I just saw in the media that big agricultural areas have been completely wiped out. So, which is going to drive the cost of vegetables up even further.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
In amongst all of that, how do you as a cafe owner manage knowing what the safety net is for you to pass on those expenses to your consumer, while at the same time trying to make sure in a market that it's really hard to retain staff, that your staff want to stay with you because you can keep paying them a wage that keeps them maintaining their lifestyle. Because that's the delicate balance, right? Like if my wages go up and all my expenses go up, my green coffee, my roasted coffee, my eggs, my croissants, everything, I've got to pass that on to somebody so that I can continue to stay in business. And if I don't, my staff are going to go somewhere where someone else will pay them more.
Yeah, exactly.
But how do I know how much of that I can pass on to my consumer and they'll stay?
Yeah, well, it is a very, very difficult balance. What are you able to do? There is an opportunity. It's a difficult one.
Well, because you and I have had conversations about your customer acquisition planning, and I remember you told me this story about how when parents drop their children off, the kids that are going to work with you, right?
Yeah.
How proud the parents are that their children are working for you rather than somewhere else. Do you think that plays a role in how you retain your staff in such challenging times? And do you think that kind of loyalty helps people want to try to figure out how to support your business? Is that a currency in today's challenging times, do you think?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And coming back to the staff retention, if the cafe, your client who arrives at the cafe, if they start to see sort of unfamiliar faces, then that loyalty starts to sort of break down in a fashion. They start to not have a great deal of security when they walk into the space. So that, as a cafe owner, that's when you're required to be front and center. You're required to be that really familiar face when someone walks through the door. And that, at the end of the day, in my experience, has really guaranteed loyalty. And even further to that is when you do find yourself needing to put up the prices, again, you need to own it. You need to be that person there who helps them through that. You need to sort of guarantee that that the service hasn't changed. You need to guarantee that that the consistency of the product hasn't changed. But there is going to be a point in time when, they're going to need to pay a little bit more for it. It's a
Remember
fine,
when we were
delicate.
coming into the industry? Sorry, I interrupted you there. I just had a thought that I hadn't thought about for a really long time. When we used to increase the price of a coffee by 5 cents, at the beginning, like when we were babies in the industry, you would notice that if a coffee was increased, like I feel like I'm 300 years old talking about, do you remember when we had pennies? But literally a 5 cents shift in the price of coffee here in Australia, it was a big deal. So too was if you changed your coffee roaster.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that? Like it was
absolutely.
a big deal, especially in, I can only speak to the Sydney coffee market, but it was a really big deal here if you made those kinds of changes.
Hugely.
Do you think that people have adapted to shifts in small businesses like cafes more now as consumers than they used to?
Well, I think it's another force thing that's been put on them in the recent years. The market for takeaway now is huge, just because everyone, I believe, just sort of got into that mentality of not being able to sit down somewhere. But I mean, we've had to evolve how our systems are able to cater to the increased level of takeaway coffee and food as well. We have had to gather new machinery, sort of train other staff, whether that machinery be automated machinery. But another thing has been at-home consumption as well. People who are used to coming in and having that second coffee, they're now required to buy a bag of beans to take that home with them.
To keep it affordable, is that what you mean?
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
So they might have that coffee machine that's been sitting on the bench since 2020 that they haven't really done a great deal with, and then all of a sudden they're like, okay, well, everything around me is starting to cost more.
Yeah.
How do I make my daily ritual? How do I make it more cost effective for me? So they're the people who are now taking coffee beans home with them. A lot of cafe owners, they may see that as a bit of a threat to growth, but I think that's sort of where the mentality really needs to start to shift in sort of, okay, well, how do I cater to those people who are consuming a lot more coffee and or food at home? Do I look at selling retail packs? Do I look to putting together sort of meal kits to take home with them? Sort of a bit of the cafe vibe that you can take with you. But I mean, they're the sorts of things that you find yourself really starting to sort of like pivot and recognize, okay, well, that's an opportunity that I've recognized that I'm able to hopefully cater to.
It sounds like you're leaning on some of the skills you learnt when the pandemic hit to adapt
Absolutely,
and pivot to show up now as like, all right, let's do this all over again and find new solutions for the current crisis that started.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, sounds awesome. And leads us perfectly into our next episode, which is like, what are the challenges coffee roasters are experiencing right now? Because that's a whole other kettle of fish with regards to the supply chain and coffee pricing and climate change and all that. So let's talk about that in the next episode.
Sounds good.
All right. See you in the next episode, everybody. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Mapper Forward on Patreon and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.